Hi, Theo. It's Resistance? What? Yeah, this is Jane Eyre Chapter 2 analysis. Alright, so I'm back. What I'm going to be doing now is 15 to 30 minute videos, because apparently my 40-minute video was a little bit too long for one chapter, so let's get into it. Right into the very beginning, we see that Jane Eyre resisted the urge to go inside. Already we make Jane Eyre into a character as a very interesting and intriguing character. What I like about this resistance is that she did not wish to be suppressed. It's all about that revolutionary spirit. And this was very new in the 1820s, remember that. In the 1820s, a lot of people were being, how do I say it, kind of suppressed by every government. Because back at that time, no one thought about this revolution as a big thing. Until, of course, the 1960s comes along and it's like, oh my gosh, it's Revolution Day every day. But in the 1830s, this was like 130 years ago, revolution was very rare. So putting Jane Eyre as someone who's very revolutionary makes her a character that stands out and is very unique. Now, what we like here is that she's compared to, I think, really well by Charlotte Bronte as kind of like a slave. She really is a slave because of her treatment in this household. You would think that we would treat orphans well, right? Because you took them in, and so you're supposed to care for them and nurture them. But that's really not true, and this is just exposing what we choose not to expose. We think that everyone's so angelic and cherubic, and in reality, they have a devilish and impish self that's never seen. The wicked self is always avoided. So, I'm opening my book, and let's see what we find here. It says that she resisted all the way a new thing for her. Now, why do we see a change in Jane Eyre from here to before? It's because the violence that John Reed is putting on her is now suppressing any other violence before. So much violence that she has to speak out. And therefore she did go into self-defense mode against John Reed, hence her being in the Red Room. Now, it being called a Red Room is somewhat symbolic in my opinion. A Red Room is considered a little bit mysterious and scary. Red is a symbol of blood. Blood and fire and everything is red. Red is never a good color. You get this intense fervor and anger and rebelliousness. It's like she needs to get out. This red is exploding out of her. And the Red Room just pictures the picture of the Red Room. It just symbolizes what her anger is towards her captors. She really doesn't like that. And Miss Abbott shows no mercy. Miss Abbott is one of the servants, and Miss Abbott's pretty much completely treating her like, in many ways, shit. And the reason why I say that word, yes, I did just say it, is because she literally calls Jane Eyre to be someone who is worse than a servant, mind you, and they're supposed to treat Jane Eyre with the same amount of care as anybody else, which is what I'm going to read here. And it just says here, "No, you are less than a servant, for you do nothing for your keep. There sit down and think over your wickedness." So Jane Eyre is forced to repent. Basically, she didn't do anything, and she has to repent not doing anything. Of course, she did self-defend, but is self-defense a really bad thing? I wouldn't say so. So here is what I think is something very seen in stories. When you have to repent for sins that you didn't have to do, this is kind of, in my opinion, that weird religious stuff. And this is also seen in the book Carrie by Stephen King, where Carrie has to repent after doing a few things that her mother is not happy about. It's literally very normal stuff. I don't remember at the top of my head, but like going to the prom, or for example, becoming a woman, essentially. And this is like where she's doing womanly things, her mother is against it. And this is, again, that whole religious horror. Religion is very tied into horror in this way. because it's all about repenting, and we're like, is Jesus Christ really that bad of a person? So I find it interesting how religion is usually tied into scary stuff. You would think religion is all cherubic and great, but actually I think the most frightening horror, the most frightening stories come from religious context. And of course the Victorian era was filled with religion, so we have that. Now, Bessie shows a little bit more mercy to Jane Eyre. Bessie actually considers her scream to be a cry for help, right? She actually does care a little bit, and she does show some emotion. And I think that's personally because Bessie does read books, and because she reads books, she does find emotion in them. Miss Abbott, on the other hand, does not really care that much. She is just like, I'm a servant, and I am going to do it as I'm told. I don't want to get Mrs. Reed angry at me, because if I at all, go against Mrs. Reed and what she wants, well then I get kicked out and I get fired. And I already approached this before. The servants kind of have to obediently follow the family, or else they risk losing their jobs, right? Because then you can say, oh, they're not handling their job properly. So that's what I talked about in the first episode, but I'm just going to leech onto it in the second episode of here in chapter 2. Now, Bessie, on the other hand, I think Bessie does show a little bit of mercy, but at the same time, she doesn't really seem to care that much. And at the same time, she can only care so much, but definitely Jane Eyre is alone in this world. There are very few protagonists that are sitting alongside her, and they may come into later in the story, but currently they don't come in. And we are going to talk right now about Jane Eyre having to be tied up. Now, she was tied up because of her rebelliousness and her emotion. But getting tied up, I think that that's a pretty cruel measure to take, and it's a little bit of an exaggeration. It reminds me somewhat, and I guess this is not, the perfect example, but I'm just seeing this as something that's akin to. I remember when, in the trial of the Chicago 7, it's a movie, if you haven't watched it, go watch it, Bobby Seale was tied down in the court, and he was literally gagged, and he was tied up, and there was no reason why he was gagged. He was not even part of the court, but this is just discrimination, in my opinion, for specific groups of people, right? Orphans get discriminated more than other groups, same with black people. And this is, in my opinion, the discrimination that society has faced. To say that we are free of discrimination is absolutely preposterous and ridiculous and should never be considered. These books help us realize what it was like during those times. And you're like, well, then we are animals, aren't we? We treat other people like animals. We do, but we didn't find those people to be people. Society had ingrained in this idea that these people were not really human. Orphans, for example, they were not normal. They were strange, mysterious. We adopted them because we are the amazing people. We care, but we can treat them like our little pets. Now, that's questionable, isn't it? So, I just need you to sit back here and think about that questionable decision as I move on to a further section of the book. Now, who is the narrator? I think it is Jane Eyre, but at the same time, is it Jane Eyre later, or is it her right now? How much later? Because we see that Jane Eyre says, in retrospect, so she's an older Jane Eyre, but how old? These questions the author doesn't answer, and the author leaves us to wonder and ponder why. I think this, personally, is Jane Eyre retelling her life from a much better position, probably. She's reflecting and saying, well, that's how it used to be. Or is maybe she about to die while she's writing the book? Very, very, very mysterious. Now, of course, We have a threat by Miss Abbott. Miss Abbott is definitely the more cruel of the two, and as seen by the Chimney Quote. The Chimney Quote states, and I will read now word for word, my friends, what the Chimney Quote is. It says right here, "Besides," said Miss Abbott, "God will punish her. He might strike her dead in the midst of her tantrums, and then where would she go? Come, Bessie, we will leave her. I wouldn't have her heart for anything. Say your prayers, Miss Eyre, when you are by yourself, for if you don't repent, something bad might be permitted to come down the chimney and fetch you away." Karma, right? Karma for your actions. We believe that God will punish us. Karma will come in and swoop us. This kind of reminds me of my own life. I remember my parents saying to me, well, Lazarevich, you didn't do this well, God's going to come and he's going to punish you for that decision. And this feels like the exact same thing that they're doing to Jane Eyre. Of course, this is a complete fallacy. We can't really say that God knows every single thing, and even if there was a supernatural being, it is definitely for us to kind of make sure that that person doesn't repeat such a mistake, or what we consider a mistake. Once again, it is a questionable use of God, so I wonder particularly if there was a God, what would God think about using such threats? Because I don't think God would be fine with it. He would be like, well, I mean, why are you just putting my name into everything and just using it as an enforcement system to make sure your child doesn't do this? But at the same time, well, parents have a hard job. They have to do something. Of course, this is not a parent. This is a servant. So I cannot make the fair comparison right here. I'm just giving an analogy to my own life. But when we're looking at Miss Abbott, I think that Miss Abbott is definitely out against Jane Eyre. She can't at all use any violence against Jane Eyre, but definitely she thinks that some supernatural being will do this. And once we lock Jane Eyre into this room, what it really reminds me of is it reminds me of solitary confinement. Solitary confinement does not do good things to your brain. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I know that's like, what? Oh my gosh, you're Captain Obvious right now. But what I'm trying to say is that solitary confinement is never a good solution. In fact, I think in the beginning of solitary confinement, that was used as a way for, I think, Samaritan laws, something like that. It was like it was some religious things, and we still continue solitary confinement to this day. That's a very debatable decision. Should we continue solitary confinement? Because, I mean, it's what it does to the brain is that it drives you insane. I think Jane Eyre was driven a little bit insane, and that caused her to have her scream, which I will talk about later in this chapter. But I can definitely say with full assurance that solitary confinement is never the perfect solution. She's locked in this red room. Everyone is gone, and no one comes to save her. The red room is described as a spare chamber, very seldom slept in. I might say never, indeed, unless when a chance influx of visitors at Gateshead Hall rendered it necessary to turn to account all the accommodation it contained. Yet it was one of the largest and stateliest chambers in the mansion. A bed supported on massive pillars of mahogany, hung with curtains of deep red damask, with their blinds always stood out like a tabernacle in the center. The two large windows with their blinds always drawn down were half shrouded in festoons and falls of similar drapery. The carpet was red, the table at the foot of the bed was covered with a crimson cloth. The walls were a soft fawn color with a blush of pink in it. The wardrobe, the toilet table, the chairs were of darkly polished old mahogany. The bed is some sort of grand, stately thing. The bed is considered a tabernacle. What is a tabernacle? A tabernacle is essentially the tent that they rescue the Ark of the Covenant in. So already we see a religious reference, but why does Charlotte Bronte do this? Why does the bed symbolize so much? Well, she's building this whole image of the Gateshead Hall, number one, because John Reed died there. So it's just like this big emptiness. Something that's left untouched, yet there's so much to touch. It's, in many ways, a contradiction. Because there's so much, yet there's not much at all. You see, there's so much in that room, but when we have a grave there, when that dead spirit lies there, well, that dead spirit turns off anybody who wants to go there. No one wants to be in the same room as a dead corpse. And all of a sudden, it feels like a mysterious irregularity in our lives. And when Jane Eyre is forced to face this irregularity, well, let's just say, the ghost has risen from the grave. Again, the bed is huge. And when we make this tabernacle connection, I think that personally refers to is who is in the Ark of the Covenant? Maybe Jane Eyre. Is she the person being rescued? That was something that I found really curious. Why would we compare her to a tabernacle unless she's being rescued? Who's being rescued then? I don't know. But it's also described as a Marseille counterpane. Snowy Marseille counterpane. So we make a reference to the French city, Marseille. Marseille is considered to be one of the most beautiful cities. And what I really enjoy in stories is when they use this definition of snow. Because there is no snow. Yet, this whole idea of snow gives that feeling of cold, of freezing. It feels like if I was trapped there, oh god, I think I would freeze to death. Yet of course you wouldn't. This feeling of snow, the cold November rain that the story was set in, it appeals to our senses. We think about the times that we stepped into the snow. We think about the times that the cold was so cold that we couldn't endure it anymore. The snowflakes were on our foreheads. And we just looked at it, and we observed it. We looked at it and observed it. We looked at it and observed it. But this snowy counterpane, it's so hard to describe what that means. Why does Jane Eyre put this setting into her account? Assuming that Jane Eyre is a narrator. And the reason why I think is because it's supposed to add suspense. Because cold usually signifies there's going to be suspense and it's going to be freezing and what's going to happen, I don't know. But also, it's to symbolize isolation. She is in a cold place outside of warmth. Remember, warmth is associated with comfort. But when you're cold, you're isolated. You're in a different world. That's where Jane Eyre lives. She doesn't live next to Eliza or Georgina or John Reed. She doesn't live next to the Reed brothers and sisters. She doesn't live in their house. She lives in a separate world, yet she abides in their house. It's kind of like an airport. An airport is in New York City, but at the same time, it's not. You see, you pass the security checkpoint, and all of a sudden, you're not anywhere. You're nowhere. Yet, nowhere is somewhere. She is that airport. and she needs to find some passengers. And well, maybe Bessie is going to be taking a flight soon. You can see that I'm really enjoying this. So, the Red Room is chill. It seldom had a fire. I talked about this all. But Mr. Reed had been dead 9 years. Is 9 a symbolic number? No, it just means that he has been dead for a long time. So Jane Eyre has known very little life with him. In fact, I think she was very young when he was alive, maybe 1 or 2, I believe. And 9 years is a lot. So I bet you at the beginning she was just thinking about Mr. Reed all the time. Now it's like she has almost accepted her hopeless fate. And it's really sad because she's so young. She has the age of 10 or 11. And just to have to deal with that, for me, I couldn't do that. I couldn't think that my father, who had brought me in, just died. And imagine I was left, like, if I was in her situation. My father, it's not her father, it's the brother of her mother. Someone so close to you, dead, and the only one you have is the person they're married to. I mean, you're in such an uncomfortable situation because you don't have anyone you're close to. Everyone's gone, and you feel like you're in that isolated island. I think personally that being in that chamber allowed Jane Eyre to really start feeling and to start getting that rebelliousness. It led to that scream. All that, the scream, the scream, the scream, the scream, the scream. Now we are going to look at the mirror. She looks at the mirror and everything looks cold and dark. Tiny phantoms. Strange little figure there gazing at me. Now, when it is half fairy, half imp, she can't believe that this is her in that room. She doesn't comprehend such a notion because, well, it seems like she must be in a better place, right? She was taken in by John Reed, and yet she's now in this little, but rather large, room where all she sees is transparency, mirrors and mirrors and mirrors. What mirrors do is they kind of give this feeling of someone's looking at you, somebody is following you, somebody is watching over you, and this feeling of fairy and imp. You see, why does her figure seem transformed in her mind? Because isolation can do weird things. Isolation can cause you to feel scared and to feel like you don't know what you're doing. But now, the rant. Jane Eyre's rant. She calls Eliza selfish, Georgina spoiled, and she also believes that John Reed is really violent. They are way too perfect, and they get to indulge in things, and she doesn't. I personally think that the brothers and the sisters represent sins. They are complete sins because they're gluttonous, they're greedy, they want to do harm, they're happy about doing harm, it's a pleasure to harm for them, but specifically just John Reed. But the thing is, everyone is just a bystander. His sisters are a bystander. They could do something, but they're bystanders. Once again, conformity, male dominance in the world of 1830s. Right there. And John Reed, how do I say this? He is sadistic. Like, really sadistic. He takes pleasure in killing pigeons. He cuts these, he chokes these pigeons. Can you imagine what charges and animal abuse we would give John Reed? And what I like is that John Reed is the head of the household. This abuser, this sadist, he's the guy that we look up to. And Jane Eyre's eccentricity, her curiosity to learn more, is looked down upon. It's frowned upon. It's like, no, you can't. No, you have to be the sadist. Of course, you can't be him. Only he can, because he's a man. He was someone who had a father and a mother. They didn't die both. Only his father died, mother's not. He's not an orphan. No, he's not. No, he's not. John Reed gets things. He's greedy. He gets to eat, right? He gets to indulge. And Mrs. Reed, the mother, so oblivious, unnoticed at all, and just really, really naughty. He's a really naughty person. Now, I think that one particular passage disturbed me truly, and I started thinking, okay, John Reed, I hate this guy. This guy is the true antagonist. Here we go. This is really weird. He called his mother, this is John Reed, by the way, he called his mother old girl too, sometimes reviled her for her dark skin. What? Why? Oh my god, that is this. It's so. It's just mean, first of all. He criticizes her mother for her dark skin. That's what reviling means. He insults her, and she allows him just to be fine. Old girl. I don't think that's at all appropriate to address your elders that way. I mean, he has no sympathy for his elders. And this is the satire. Jane Eyre, she has to be so polite, so nice. John Reed, on the other hand, can do whatever he wants. He can say, oh, his mother is an old girl. What? She's not a mother, she's an old girl. I mean, how rude is it to call a mother an old girl? That mother has provided for you. She literally has nourished you throughout your life, and you call her an old girl? How damn disrespectful. How damn disrespectful. John Reed is tyrannical and crazy. Now, what's happening is that she really believes everything that he's done to be very unjust. Everything to her is just unfair, unjust, immoral. And as we move forward with the second chapter, we will see that she believes she would be treated different if she was better in looks, if she looked more human and conformed to the norms that the Reed family would like, if she was more complying, if she satisfied their every needs. Essentially, if she was more handsome and brilliant and perfect, it'd be fine. Yet, on the other hand, John Reed can be as obese as he wants. He cannot do these things, yet she has to. She needs to say that they're the perfect family, yet they're not. And this is about noticing the imperfections in the idea of perfection. Noticing how some places are not what they seem. You can live in a mansion, sure, but are mansions good? No. It's about the people who live in the mansions. It's not about the experience. It's about what happens within that experience. Guys, I'm going to be going soon. But just so you know, let's finish off with this. Jane Eyre soon does become suicidal. She's ready to die. And then, all of a sudden, she lets out a scream. Mr. Reed seems to be coming out of the grave. Or is he coming out of the grave? He is just some sort of mysterious ghost just pervading into her life. And that's probably because she wants some of his angelic spirits to help her, lead her in this journey of life. But how far can she go? Who knows? We only know that when Mrs. Reed comes in, she's not happy with Jane Eyre's scream. And guess what? She's still in the Red Room for a longer amount of time. And this is where it gets tense. Everyone is an actor. Should we even allow that to happen? Why are some people only actors? Why are others just parts of the world? Just simulations that we can play with? No, people are people. And regarding anyone as a simulation is absolutely horrible. But one thing that I want you to take out from this episode, nobody should ever underestimate the terror of solitary confinement. Fear, terror, it's brutal, it's ghastly, it's horrible. Especially when you're only viewed as a character, not as a human being. And until next time, see you, let's flick the chow.